I thought we'd outrun it. I thought we'd buried the nightmare. They said it was over, that the infected had all died off.
Since the project's official announcement, 28 years later has been getting plenty of exciting updates, including an official release date. Although there's still a bit of a wait, this long-anticipated zombie sequel is set to hit theaters on June 20th, 2025. Here's a rundown of everything we know about the movie so far. The summer release timing of 28 years later hints that it's aiming to be a big hit, although we're still waiting to hear about release dates for the second and third movies in this planned trilogy. While details on the plot are still under wraps, it's likely that we'll get more insights as the film progresses through post-production. Filming for 28 years later kicked off in May 2024, and in a surprising update, wrapped up faster than expected. To stay on track for the June 2025 release, the team completed most of the filming in just under 2 months, shooting on location in the UK. And it's not just 28 years later that's in the works. Filming for a sequel is about to begin. Though plot details for the second movie are minimal, the quick back-to-back schedule suggests that it will pick up right where 28 years later leaves off. A third film is also part of the plan, but its future remains uncertain. Producer Andrew McDonald recently shared his excitement, saying, "We're making hopefully 3 more 28 films, with the first one called 28 Years Later that Alex has written and Danny has directed, and we've finished shooting. Then we're just about to start tomorrow morning actually, part 2, and then we hope there's going to be a third part and it's a trilogy." The cast for 28 Years Later is coming together, though many roles are still under wraps. Cillian Murphy, who starred as Jim in 28 Days Later, is set to make a return after being absent from the first sequel. Alongside him, Kraven the Hunter's Aaron Taylor Johnson has been announced as part of the cast. Joining Murphy and Taylor Johnson are Jodie Comer and Ralph Fiennes, though we're still waiting on details about their characters. Another intriguing addition is Jack O'Connell, whose role is expected to grow throughout the trilogy. While it's unclear how large a part Fiennes and Taylor Johnson will play, O'Connell's character will have a recurring presence across all 3 films. The upcoming movie 28 Years Later promises a big time jump that'll let us see the long-term impact of the virus outbreak. Originally, there was talk of a script for 28 months later thanks to Variety, but it looks like Alex Garland and Danny Boyle have chosen to leap even further into the future for this installment. The original 28 Days Later ended on a hopeful note, suggesting the infected were gone for good until the virus made a brutal comeback in 28 weeks later. Where the contained society collapsed and London plunged back into chaos. The sequel ended on an even darker note, with survivors reaching Paris, only to find it also infested with the infected. We can probably expect 28 years later to revisit the virus once again, but it's unclear if the world has remained in ruins since 28 weeks later, or if we'll see a twist where life has started to rebuild. In an interview with IndieWire, Ralph Fiennes recently gave some exciting insights into 28 Years Later, Danny Boyle's highly anticipated continuation of the 28 Days Later series. Fiennes described the film as set in a desolate, infected Britain, 28 years into the virus outbreak, with only a few small communities of uninfected survivors left. The story centers on a young boy traveling with his ailing mother in search of a doctor, played by Fiennes, who might be able to help her. They journey across a dangerous landscape filled with the infected, especially through northern England's scenic but risky wilderness. Fiennes' character seems mysterious at first, but he eventually reveals himself as a surprising force for good, giving us a hint at the character's complexity. This setup also helps answer questions about what might have happened 28 weeks later. Since Britain is still struggling with the infection after all these years, it's safe to assume the virus has spread globally, impacting other continents. If other countries had managed to keep the virus contained, they likely would have come to Britain's aid by now, just as the US did 28 weeks later when they tried to help rebuild London. Fiennes didn't confirm who would play the boy or his mother, but there's speculation that Jodie Comer might take on the role of the mother, given her range and recent roles. Erin Kellyman, who appeared in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is another possible candidate, though her age might suggest a different part. Meanwhile, the boy could potentially be played by young royal star Edvin Ryding, though his involvement is still uncertain. Another interesting theory circulating about 28 years later is that Cillian Murphy's character Jim might return as a father figure. Jim has come a long way since the events of 28 Days Later, where he teamed up with Selena, Frank, and his daughter Hannah to navigate a chaotic, infected world. In that film, Jim and Selena found comfort and purpose by forming a makeshift family unit, especially after Frank's tragic loss. 28 years later, Jim could now embody that role of a fatherly protector, especially given the harsh realities he's faced over the years. If the film carries forward the themes of connection and resilience in the face of horror, Jim might be a guiding force for others. He could be both a biological father, perhaps to a child he had with Selena, and a father figure for an older Hannah, who might still be in his life. Though we're not sure if Selena and Hannah will appear in the sequel, Jim's character could still evolve into a mature leader who understands that survival hinges on humanity's ability to stick together against the infected. The movie will likely dive into Jim's growth as a character and explore how he's learned to navigate a world that's been ravaged by the rage virus. This setup allows 28 years later to reflect on both the horror of the infection and the resilience of survivors, showing Jim as someone who's not only survived but learned to protect others. For those he encounters in the film, Jim could become a figure of wisdom and stability, a reminder that even in the worst of times, humanity's best chance lies in coming together. As we know, 28 years later picks up on Jim's comic book storyline, but with some changes. After the events of 28 Days Later, Jim, Selena, and Hannah ended up in France, where they were dubbed the Manchester Three. Things took a dark turn for Jim, who was arrested and sentenced to death for killing Major West and his men. Since 28 Years Later is all about Jim coming back, it can't stick to the comic book's ending. However, it can still explore how Jim's been locked up for 3 decades and is finally getting a taste of the outside world after seeing the worst of humanity while in prison. This setup could lead to a storyline where Jim steps out of prison, totally oblivious to how much everything has changed since he got arrested. Remember how his journey in 28 Days Later kicked off with him waking up from a coma, completely confused about what had happened in London? Well, 28 Years Later could mirror that vibe, showing Jim as this naive character trying to adjust to a world that's moved on without him. These parallels would give both films a nice narrative thread while also giving Jim a fresh start for his new adventure. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Your suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop.